Hello and welcome to this introductory video on researching Canadian government policy. The video is split into three parts. First, we'll look at background research, including think tank, lobby group, and stakeholder information. Then we'll see how we can find government information, including key parliamentary documents. And finally, we'll look at how we can research government spending and government oversight. I'm now going to introduce you to the documents and resources that will help you to track policy by tracking spending. Once again, we're going to refer to the library's research guide, and you'll see that indeed there is a separate section on government spending and oversight. We will not go into any details on the Parliamentary Budget Cycle. We simply don't have time here. The budget cycle itself and what happens is a fairly complex matter. But what we will look at are the documents that are produced during the budget cycle, as they can tell us a lot about how government enacts and administers policy. The first three documents that you should look for and consult are the Throne Speech, Budget Speech, and the Budget Implementation Acts. The Throne Speech is a speech delivered at the beginning of each parliamentary session by the sovereign or her representative. It is delivered to both houses of Parliament, and while it purports to be delivered by the sovereign, it is actually written by the government and contains essentially the government's plans for the coming session, and it tells us what policies are going to be enacted or changed during the coming weeks or the coming months. The budget speech is a bit different but is equally important. The budget speech is a speech delivered by the Minister of Finance in Parliament, and it contains an overall plan for the government for the coming year, notification of their intentions, what they're going to spend money on and why, and it also contains an assessment of the fiscal health of the government and of the economy. Now, budget implementation acts are very important as well because they make it possible for the government to spend money. If government policy requires the creation of or the modification of the responsibilities of government departments, if new laws need to be brought in, if new matters need to be enacted in order for the money to be spent and for the policy to be carried out, the law needs to be changed beforehand, and these are done by what are known as budget implementation acts. The actual spending itself is tracked in a series of documents known as expenditure plans and estimates, and they're supported by the departmental plan reports and the departmental reports on plans and priorities. Now, the expenditure plans and estimates are submitted to Parliament for approval. All of the requests that are made are then divided up by agency and by purpose. The individual requests are numbered for voting and tracking, and then they're sent to specific committees for consideration. Now, for researching policy, this is important because once the committees receive the requests, they then hold hearings and they may ask the public for input, especially if something novel or major is being introduced, and then they report back their findings to Parliament with recommendations. After this, Parliament votes on the recommendations item by item, and the requests for spending are approved or not. The requests are supported by departmental reports and reports on plans and priorities, and there's two separate documents, but they're often found together. Each department submits a departmental report, normally called a departmental performance report, discussing how it spent its money in the last year and what was achieved. And this is used for oversight and to help to evaluate the department's requests. The reports on plans and priorities are submitted as a part of the appropriation process, and they list all of the votes, but they give a discussion, figures from previous years, and they attempt to justify the request for money. And these two documents together are considered by Parliament when it makes its decision as to whether or not to spend money, but they tell us a lot about what the individual departments are doing and why and what they intend to do in the coming year. And finally, we have a series of oversight documents from the Auditor General, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, and others, and including the actual financial accounts in the form of the Public Accounts of Canada. Sometimes these can be very useful, especially when governments get into trouble or when there are accusations of misspending or inefficiencies, and we can turn to the audit documents and the oversight documents to get a little bit more about the effect of government policy as it relates to government operations. Now, returning to the guide, you'll see that they're all available here. Each is discussed and a link is provided to them, including a link to the departmental reports. And perhaps most important, at the bottom, you'll find a list of the committees to which and the departments that they oversee. So if you're interested in a specific organization, check this list because it'll tell you the standing committee that has actually considered the department's request for money, and you can consult their documentation and find out what they happen to think, and also find out if any hearings were held that included outside testimony. The instructions for doing that are also found in the guide. And then at the end, you will find links to the oversight documents. Now that ends this part of the video. We've just taken a look at all the resources you'll use to research government policy. Now the first time out it will appear to be a bit daunting, but that's to be expected. But please remember that if you're stuck, no matter what, contact us for assistance because that's what we're here for. Thank you and good luck.